Hi to everyone who has been able to sit in to Donum Dei Classical Academy's first webinar, a new classical Christian school opening in San Francisco. Whether you're on live stream on Facebook or those who are perhaps watching at a later time, we're so happy you could be here. My name is Janine Van Vliet. I am one of Donum Dei's founding partners, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. You may be here because you are seeking new educational opportunities for your family in San Francisco, or you may want to know more about classical Christian education. We hope to answer these questions and more in our time together. Feel free to use the chat panel on Zoom to submit questions. We'll try to answer them during this live webinar, but if we don't, we will respond later via email. To begin, let's meet the people of Donum Dei. Mr. Colin McLean, a local business leader and father of 5 children who are classically educated, will share about our leadership. Colin, could you introduce the founding team?
Absolutely. Thanks, Janine. And thank you all for joining our webinar. In starting Donum Dei, we've taken great heed to the scriptures and specifically Matthew 7 in terms of how we're building a strong foundation. So with that, first and foremost, obviously, is building it on the truth of Jesus Christ, but secondarily, also building it with a very strong founding team who's represented in front of us. And just a bit of background on the team, you just met Janine, who has a background at University of Pennsylvania and is a classical educator who has a passion to serve children as well as educate with excellence. B. Maraza, just above her, is 10 years in the Bay Area, pastor's wife, classical educator, and really a heartbeat to try to connect families within the city. Myself, a local business leader who has a keen desire to make this school we're starting a sustainable option for now and the future. And on the left-hand side, Megan and Nate Fitcher, who are both entrepreneurs as well as a background at Harvard Law, offer a tremendous amount of structure and focus to our founding team and helping us make sure we build a sustainable future for Donum Dei. And finally, last but not least, my lovely wife, Christine, with a substantial educational background, a doctorate at UT, undergraduate at UCLA, background in both higher ed and organizational change, and as important as anything else, a classical educator who has raised up our 5 children in the Lord and has a passion to see that translated well in the city. So I'd love to turn the call over to Christine to educate you both on our vision for Donum Dei, as well as to tell a bit about why San Francisco and why Donum Dei now. Christine?
Thank you, Colin. So I was just thinking back to our founding team and how really the vision for this school even began. And in our part, we came here as a family, like many families in San Francisco, with intentions of staying really only a year. And we were going to explore and adventure around the Pacific Northwest because my husband's job brought us here. And we're from Austin, Texas, where we had opportunities to look to returning and sending our children to any of the 5 classical Christian schools there. And as we went back to visit Austin on one of our recent trips, we started navigating our various options and just felt a great sense of comfort and ease. And when we returned to San Francisco and started really contemplating where we were at, my heart just sunk. And we were on a ski trip on our way to Lake Tahoe. And I shared with Colin, I was like, there's no school like this in San Francisco that is both spiritually robust and academically rigorous. And if we ever even thought of staying here, we would actually have to start a school. And right as I heard myself say that, I just felt a strong conviction. And within a week, B. Maraza approached me and she said, I have to share with you this dream that I have to open a classical school. And immediately that wasn't what I wanted to hear because I felt a prompting and I really wrestled. And I remember just saying like, Lord, this place, San Francisco, it doesn't feel like home. And at that point, I was just strongly felt like neither should have Austin. I was too comfortable there. And I know my home isn't here on earth, it's in heaven. And so I really started feeling strongly that I grew a desire and a love for San Francisco in ways that I hadn't previously. And I started truly desiring this kind of a school here for the families that we were befriending. I knew they didn't know what they were missing, and I wanted to provide that for them, knowing what we had in Austin and what could be. I saw these families here and I wanted to offer that to them. And so we started with a prayer team, and there was a prayer team of about 8 people across various churches. And we got together and just said, hey, we'll search God on this and see where it takes us. And so as we established that prayer team, I really started immersing myself in the history and the impact of San Francisco. So as you look at the impact of San Francisco, we started asking the question of like, why San Francisco? Why now? Is this even a viable school for this city right now? And started really understanding the influence of San Francisco, the national influence on its thinking, its trends, its politics, looking at its great influence, its vibrant entrepreneurial spirit. And it's really, truly one of the most influential cities in the world. And so we thought about what would it be like to rear up godly children who have access to people from 100 different nations within a 7-mile radius. What would it be to imagine if we could partner with families who walk these city streets and in the way and the truth and the life, and then just considering what it would be like to help parents build up children who would ultimately become bridge builders. I'd also really love to hear from Bea on her voice on the impact of San Francisco, because I truly value the number of years you've been here and invested in the city. You and your husband Will, just ministering to the city and desiring to see families thrive here.
Definitely. Yeah, so we've lived here 9 years now, and our family loves getting to do life in San Francisco and getting to do ministry here. San Francisco is diverse, it's rich in culture and the arts, and there's so much for a child to learn here. As far as educational options, it was a very different picture than what Christine painted going back home to Texas. For us, it was a yearly prayer. We'd come to God and ask him what he wanted us to do educationally for our kids. And we would look at all the options available to us in San Francisco. And it was hard. It was hard because we really felt like at that time, homeschooling was the best option. And through that homeschooling journey, we fell in love with classical education. We fell in love with bringing up a child to seek truth, goodness, and beauty, and really desired that not just for us, but for other families in San Francisco. And so I think that Donum Dei will offer San Francisco a kind of education that will challenge our children with a rigorous academics, but also feed their spiritual formation and their character development. And these are leaders that can, these are children that can lead in big ways in a city like San Francisco.
Thank you, Bea. Christine, could you tell us a little bit more about the mission and vision of Donum Dei?
Sure, thanks, Janine. So I would just say we're first a Christian academy. The name Donum Dei actually means a gift from God. And we just really believe that this academy is a gift from God. We see it as an opportunity to connect churches across the city and create community for Christians in ways that previously hadn't existed. We also believe the academy can be a light to the city and to serve the city and love the city. We certainly don't want to be an insular Christian school, but we want to reach out. And we really hope San Francisco embraces this gift. But we're also classical. And classical, ultimately, G.K. Chesterton would argue that education is really passing on the culture from one generation to the next. And so we think about what kind of culture do we want to pass on here in this city in San Francisco? And as you look at things historically, you see that some of the greatest thinkers and influencers of all time were classically educated. C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton, Francis Schaeffer, our founding fathers. Even Martin Luther and John Calvin, they opened schools that emphasize Latin and Greek and Hebrew. And so our goal, our mission is to impart this rich classical and Christian curriculum that's full of truth and life-giving experiences, because we want to form up the whole human person. We want to form and nourish the students' hearts, souls, minds, and bodies, so that they'll grow in wisdom, they'll grow in character, and they'll grow up in Christ-like virtue. And that's ultimately our mission here in the city.
Thank you, Christine. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about what classical education looks like in the classroom. But first, let me just take a moment here, because this is the part where I get really excited. As a parent of young children, as a historian and an educator, I love the mission and the philosophy of classical Christian education. When our youngest daughter turned even just 3, my husband and I were living in Philadelphia, and we started, asking the question every parent asks, which is, our kids are growing up, soon they're going to be going to school, and what does that look like for our family? And we looked around in Philadelphia, public schools, we really wanted a Christian education for our children, but there weren't that many accessible Christian schools in the city, much like in San Francisco. And the Christian schools that were there, maybe taught Bible as a subject, but it wasn't integrated in the way that we then learned about through classical education. I had never heard of classical education, but there was one in Philadelphia, and families from our church told us about it. And immediately my husband and I were just totally convinced. We love the Latin and the Greek, the languages, and this traditional approach that values the whole child and kind of forming the whole human. So maybe, Christine, you can speak a little bit more about that now, what it looks like in the classroom. And for now, let's just focus on the grammar school, and then maybe we can get into the other areas during information sessions, or people can go to our website for more information there.
Perfect. Thanks, Janine. So I'll just focus a little on what classical education looks like in the grammar school. And ultimately, students are going to really be taught a lot of important information by way of songs, chants, jingles, rhymes. They're going to look at and really take in historical facts and timelines, any of the various facts across subjects in science and math, Latin vocabulary, the rules of grammar. And they're going to be taught these things using multi methods. So they're going to learn it visually, auditorially, kinesthetically, and then they're also going to practice liturgies, contemplations, and observations. And what I mean by that is in the classical schools, there are actual practices in the classrooms that they employ certain ways of honoring God and honoring one another. And that comes out in how they speak to one another, how they respect their teachers. And contemplations is obviously allowing students to look at the great thinkers, the great philosophers, the great artists and musicians of all time, and to really contemplate their work, or to go out and explore nature and to have a nature journal and to contemplate the world around them and God's creation, and then to make observations. Also in the grammar school, one of the foundational subjects is Latin, and that in a lot of ways is dead in the modern curriculum and hasn't been available to many schools for about 100 years outside of the classical schools. And Latin is going to be foundational for students for developing not only their minds and their thinking, but it is also highly correlated. About 50% of the English language is founded on Latin as well. If you learn Latin grammar, you have a much greater capacity to learn English grammar really well. So truly language development, learning the fundamentals of the language, the rules of the language, but doing so in a way that brings life to the children, where they truly enjoy what they're doing, because we actually embrace the whole body, the heart, the soul, and the mind.
Great, thank you, Christine. Another really important part of Donum Dei's classical model is what we call the parent partnership. Colin, could you talk a little bit about how our parent partnership models biblical standards for raising up children, and how you as a father see your role in helping root this school in San Francisco?
Absolutely. Thanks, Janine. As a founding group, we take the call of Deuteronomy 6 very strongly, namely to teach and educate our children in the Lord. That's a calling on each mother and father. And so with that, we maintain the value of parents throughout the education process, and we desire to partner alongside them in that responsibility. Ultimately, the responsibility to grow up to get the children of the Lord is that of the parents, but we firmly believe that a proper relationship in the context of a Christ-centered education can help families actually thrive, and will be a core reason for us to be successful. So as a father of 5, I really feel like this alignment, parents and school, is vital to our success. In addition to that, what's vital is the role of our fathers. And I believe each of us believe that and know that fathers should and do have a large hand in rearing up our children. And at Donum Dei, we are going to put a particular focus on engaging fathers. I find a very high value in being present in my children's lives, and that will be a continuation at Donum Dei. So we'll look to fathers to contribute during the grammar stages with their presence and involvement in the curriculum and serving throughout the school. And as the school evolves in later years, we see fathers' roles in things like discipleship and character development growing that much more. So we believe both the father can contribute to the overall success of the school in what they do from their hands and feet, and also what they can do with their hearts and minds. And so with that, we view their role as vital.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Colin. B, could you speak a little about how you see Donum Dei supporting both families and churches in San Francisco?
Yeah. So at Donum Dei, our desire is to partner with parents. We have a shared faith in Jesus. And so as they seek to disciple and educate their children, we want to come alongside them and support them in that journey. We want to give this gift of a spiritually robust education where families have a reason to stay in San Francisco. They have a reason to set roots here and to thrive. Mm-hmm. And their child's education can be one of those reasons. Further, we want to unite the churches in San Francisco. We want our student body to look like the different churches that are represented in our city, and for people to be able to do ministry or to do their work, their sacred vocations, if you will, and feel like they just have another community of faith where they're known and they're loved and their kids are known and loved.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Christine, we're going to turn back to you. Could you tell us a little bit about your own journey as a mom, way back when your children were very young, how you and Colin decided on classical education, and how it relates to what we're going to talk about now, just the time and all the time and the hours that our children spend in school.
Sure. Thank you, Janine. As Colin mentioned early on, we have 5 children. Our oldest will be in high school next year, and our youngest is 3 years old. And as I look back, just thinking about Colin and I praying and researching all of our school options, when our oldest was really about 3 years old, we put together just a list of various factors. And the 2 main categories we had were things we believe are gifts from God. We believe time is a gift. It's here and it's limited. And we believe money is a gift, and we could use those things wisely or foolishly. And so we were desiring to use those things wisely as we were choosing where our children and how we would educate our children. So we knew time was limited with them. We knew that we only had a certain amount of time to make a great impact on their lives. And we created a list of several schools. We included a Christian school, a classical Christian school, a university model classical Christian school. And we just started looking at the potential impact of those schools. And in that context, Colin said, well, we also need to consider the public school across the street. And that never really occurred to me. And he said, if we really want God's answer on this, we need to consider all of our options. And so we were able to see even some great things about the local public school, because the public school across from us was truly a fantastic option as well. And so just after a lot of research and prayer, we discovered that the very best option was the classical Christian school for us. And it was because it emphasized a partnership with parents, that they believed that we're the ones called to disciple our children, but they wanted to help us with that. It employed teachers who loved God and loved children and really wanted to impart that to the children. They wanted to show children who God is and who they are in Him. And then it also committed to employ worthwhile programs that would make much of our children's time instead of a lot of tedious tasks that would consume their time. And so for us, that was the answer for why this particular classical Christian school, we weren't only concerned merely with information on the kinds of things our student would learn, our children would learn, but we were truly concerned about their human formation. And this was the right avenue for us. Well, that was 10 years ago. And now we live in San Francisco, and there's really no school here that we found that exists like that. And so as we're thinking about continuing to educate our 5 children, I'm looking at my now 3-year-old son and I'm envisioning his future. And so I wholeheartedly believe this more than ever. I'm convinced that families here in San Francisco would be amazed by the possibilities that this kind of school could afford to them. And I'll be happy to share too, Janine, on the year-round schedule. It also goes with time, but professionally, I worked at the University of Texas and UCLA for, over 15 years, I think, and examined various practices and how people spend their time academically and curricularly. And we have believed strongly that the year-round schedule is superior for various reasons. It reduces teacher burnout, it improves student retention, and it also affords family time to take breaks, to take Sabbath, if you want to call it that, rest when other people aren't, when crowds aren't in your way for every given student break or holiday. So the year-round schedule for us will be used to really instill a lifelong love for learning, that students don't look forward to a break at summer because they can't wait to get out of school, but rather they would have breaks all throughout the year that would completely encourage them that learning, we don't take a break from learning. Learning is something we should love.
Great. Thank you, Christine. I think the last topic we want to cover about the school itself is this idea that we're missionally driven. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means?
Sure. I'm going to just sum this up in a nutshell. We truly want to be a school that embraces the city, the various offerings of the city, but also to serve and to love the city well. Our academy has high aspirations to connect with families and students across the city. Even before our existence, even before we have opened, we've already offered 2 equipping sessions with national experts who've come in to speak on classical education. For those who are in the greater San Francisco Bay Area, we've developed friendships with classical Christian schools nationally and regionally, and we're desiring to continue to grow in that way as we establish our foundation. Hopefully, eventually, our students will be in service opportunities where they're actually serving and ministering to students in other areas of the city who might have need for our support.
Great. Thank you, Christine. Finally, we're just going to wrap up. I'm going to introduce our last panelist. It's Mrs. Hamblin, who is our Director of Admissions and Financial Assistance. She's a former middle school math teacher coming from the University of Tennessee and is now the Director of Children's Ministry at a local San Francisco church. Ms. Hamblin, can you go over this for us?
Sure. Thanks, Janine. So we are praying and working towards opening our doors of Donum Dei this fall. And our goal is to start with at least 30 kids. We currently have 14 applicants, so you could say we're almost halfway there. So if you're interested in learning more about Donum Dei for your family, the first step you need to take is to sign up for an information session. Our information sessions are a place where we share more about Donum Dei and a place where we can meet face-to-face to connect and answer more of your questions. So on the homepage of our website, www.donumdei.org, there is a Learn More and Register button where you can click to sign up for one of the information sessions that best suits your schedule. And then after the information session, we'll follow up to see how we can walk with you to help you through the admissions and applications process. With this, we ask that if you're excited about a school like this in San Francisco, that you would share this webinar. You could also follow us on our Instagram and Facebook pages to stay up to date with the latest news from Donum Day. And really just help us spread the word to the people in your own communities.
Great. Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Mrs. Hamblin, and Stephanie. And now we're just going to wrap up by letting you know that we have an ebook. This is our gift to you for attending this webinar. Thank you so much for being here. We hope that this can be a guide for you as you're thinking about other questions you may have when choosing a school. And obviously our website and our information sessions, we have many resources for you if you have questions that remain after this webinar. And once again, just thank you so much for being here. Bye-bye.